if you want to have good gut health, try to take care of your gut by eating the right stuff because you can do it.
All right, everybody, welcome to the podcast. I want to introduce you today to Dr. Mahmoud Ghannoum. He's one of the world's leading experts on microbiome, gut health. He's been published an astounding 400 papers thus far in his career and has been cited over 20,000 different times by inside of papers and by scientists, which makes him one of the top 1% most cited scientists in the world and the top 0.1% of cited microbiologists out there. In fact, he's also known as Dr. Microbiome and is the author of a book called Total Gut Balance, which we'll get into, how to fix your microbiome fast for complete digestive wellness. His work is so foundational that he's actually coined that term microbiome, which I think that's probably a good place to start. If Dr. Ghannoum, would you mind explaining to us the difference between microbiome and mycobiome? And am I saying that right?
That's great. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you. You are absolutely right. Microbiome refers to the microbes that live in our body and on our body, on the skin, for example, on the gut. But this microbiome, it is made of a number of communities: bacteria, fungi, viruses, as well as some parasites as well, okay? Whereas the term microbiome, I am an expert in fungal diseases, like fungus cause a number of diseases, and the science of fungal research, it's called mycology. That's why I called microbiome to refer to the fungal community or the community of fungus that live in our body.
So it's interesting. If you read some of your research and we talk about this community, right? This and you use some analogies to help people sort of understand what you mean by community, between that sort of, as I understand it, that balance between bacteria and we've got viruses in there. You've got all types of things that are living inside of your gut that if people knew and understood and looked at it under a microscope, they quite frankly would probably be just terrified, especially in the world we live in today, where everyone's chasing each other with hand sanitizer and toxic chemicals wiping off surfaces. The reality is a lot of the fungus and the bacteria and those viruses are serving a good purpose, as well as and some of them are not so good. And it comes down to that balance in that community. Can you help people understand that?
So look, before, when you think about germs or microbes, we are all frightened. We want to use antibiotics to kill them, or we want to use disinfectant, like, as you say, in this COVID age, everybody is trying to get rid of all the germs. But if we sit back and think about it, with the new science and the new discoveries, we know that in our body, both in our skin, in our gut, in our mouth, we have these germs living together, okay? So let's go look at the gut. In the gut, there are a group of fungi or fungus living together. And that's why I say community. It's not only one type of fungus, it's a number of different fungi. That's why they are community. It's like we live in a city or in a commune, if you will. The same applies for bacteria. It's not one type of bacteria. There are good bacteria and there are bad bacteria. Now, when we want them to live in our body to be healthy, we like to have more of the good ones, the beneficial, rather than have the bad ones that can cause disease, okay? So in a way, when you are healthy, these organisms, like you live again in a city, they get along together very well and everybody is happy living in their area, okay? Now, in our gut, these good bacteria and good fungus work together to help us and, in fact, to keep the bad germs out, okay? So that's why we mean a community. It's a number of different members from bacteria, different members from viruses, different members from fungi. They all play together like in a sandbox. And in this sandbox, if the kids are all get along together, the parents are happy. Whereas when they start kids fighting in the sandbox, then we as parents suffer from it. So this is the best example maybe to show you that in our body we have the good and the bad, and we would love to have ways to keep the good very strong.
So let's talk about the sandbox for a second. Let's talk about the kids fighting in the sandbox. It's a great analogy. I think something that everyone can relate to. So when the kids are in the sandbox, to stick with your analogy, or not getting along, what are some of the things that people can experience? Because I think that a lot of people don't understand that some of the symptoms and some of the issues, some of the disease that exists out there today. And I'd like to get into some of your research about autism and how its effect with gut health. But I think there's a lot of people don't realize that a lot of disease, it really starts with your gut, right? I mean, a lot of, from other clinicians that we've spoken to on the show, there's a lot of medicine that focuses on addressing the symptom versus addressing the cause of the issue, right? So you're taking medications to alleviate the symptom when you're not really, again, treating what the issue is. And the reality is we are big lumps of food, right? I mean, over time, we're just a big stack of food that's grown into the beings that we're staring at each other right now on this podcast. So if you could explain to people, like, what are some of the things that can go wrong with gut health and some of the most common ones that people experience?
We all experience from time to time constipation. We have some bloating. We have sometimes a little bit of pain. In extreme cases, we may have diarrhea. Okay. The other example, which everybody can understand, is inflammation. Sometimes you just don't feel well. If you have, for example, in certain diseases like Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome, for example, then you have inflammation in your gut, and that's why you don't feel very well. Okay. So these are the indicators that there is something wrong there. If I have constipation, there is something not going well. Okay, so what I would like to do, I like to address that, and one way to do it is, I'm sure we'll get into having a good diet that can support the beneficial organisms. So if you feel this out of sort, bloating, constipation, this should tell you that there is something not going right in our gut or our gastrointestinal system, and we need to address.
So when you talk about inflammation, is it possible that people can maybe not experience the bloating or the constipation or the gas and the diarrhea, but they can, through the foods that they're eating, be able to start to experience inflammation throughout their body and from a widespread perspective? Is that something you've seen in your research?
Sure. Like what happens, it depends on the food you eat. And it is well known, if you have a lot of red meat with fat in it, guess what happened? You encourage the growth of bacteria that are what we call pro-inflammatory, which means they cause some inflammation. And how do they do that? They secrete these small chemicals or molecules. We call them metabolites. And these metabolites can really start to excite our immune system, and our immune system start to react to them to keep them under control, and that's where you have inflammation.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about myself for a minute. We talked about this before the show. So for those listening for the first time, I've been a triathlete and an athlete my entire life. Been fortunate to have done a half a dozen Ironman marathons and a ton of different endurance races. So I put my body through physical stress, but I never had any injuries, no pains, no nothing other than some soreness. But in doing that, I could eat whatever I wanted, meaning that I often ate a lot of stuff that maybe I shouldn't have, because I just felt like I needed calories. You know, if you go and you train for 12 hours in a day, you need to take in, 9,000 calories or so, or else I would start to just wither away to nothing. Now, while I don't do a lot of that endurance racing now, I continue to be very active, and I never associated food with being unhealthy, meaning that like I could eat whatever I wanted and I always stayed fit. But what I realized was about a year ago, I started having this widespread inflammation inside of my body, and I had tests done, and it looked at a variety of different things. Was it autoimmune? What was it? What was it that I was experiencing for somebody who's otherwise very healthy? And my knees were aching, and I was seeing a chiropractor. I bought a different mattress for my bed. I was trying everything I could to get rid of this stiffness and this pain. And I never thought for once over a year, all that other stuff, that maybe it was what I was putting in my mouth. Because again, I wasn't fat, I wasn't gaining weight, so I didn't associate food with unhealthiness. Then I started to realize that I walked by the pantry and maybe grabbed a handful of Twizzlers 4 or 5 times a day, right? I'd eat a bowl of Lucky Charms at night. I would do those types of things but again, I wasn't fat and I was fine. I was fit. But man, I did not feel good, Doc. I did not feel good at all. So I decided to go start to look at the food that I was eating, and realize after a 3-day fast of just water that when my inflammation started to recess, that they're clearly what I'm putting inside of me is having an effect on my body. And I was diagnosed with something called leaky gut, which I think is a pretty common term. I just found this out. Something that a lot of people hear. It's a term thrown around in the supplement world. Can you talk about leaky gut? Talk about maybe just widespread inflammation for a minute, and how common this is.
Yeah. First of all, let's define what is leaky gut.
Please.
Remember, in our gut, we have sort of a chamber where good stuff should stay, and then we break down the food, and then this is get absorbed, the vitamins, the minerals, the good stuff, which will help our body. Okay. Now, when you are healthy, only you have normal digestion and normal absorption of nutrients, which will help you. However, if you have damage to the lining of your gut, okay, then things start to leak in. It's like you have a pipe that broken in your house, and then the water start to leak in. But here we are leaking stuff from our gut into our blood, our circulation. And with that, what in particular we are doing, we are letting some of the bacteria or their product go into our blood, and of course they start to cause inflammation and other sort of thing. So leaky gut, it's like I said, the best example is you have a pipe and you have a hole in it, and then water start to leak out. The same is here in our gut, where we break it, and then unfortunately, not only we have the good food coming in and good nutrients, we are sending byproducts of these germs into our blood, which then can cause inflammation and other sort of issues. Okay. The other thing which I want to talk to you about is like what you said, when you are exercising and this sort of thing, and you eating everything. One example I want to give you is our gut is like a garden. Okay. In what way? If in the summer, I love to have roses in my garden. So I need to fertilize them. I need to give them good food. Then you have lovely garden. At the same time, you need to get rid of the weeds. Okay. So if you don't get rid of the weeds, then they'll overtake the roses and it's not fun anymore. Now, the same in our gut. What we would like to do, we would like to maintain the good beneficial microbes, such as bacteria and some yeast, such as Saccharomyces cerevisiae, for example, which is baker's yeast for the people who are listening. While we are getting rid of the microbes that can cause inflammation. Remember, we talked about pro-inflammatory. These microbes, they start producing chemicals and they cause inflammation. So really, it's in our hand how to try to control our gut with what we eat. We feed the good guys and get rid of the bad guys.
So when you talk about somebody who has this imbalance, and they've it's obviously taken a lifetime of eating things, the wrong things, and maybe types of food that maybe I have maybe not so much an allergy to, but just an IgG type of a response to it. And a lot of us don't realize it. In fact, we did my wife and I did food sensitivity tests, and it was pretty wild to see the types of things that we were sensitive to. Specifically, my wife was sensitive to things like spinach and blueberries, two things that you would consider that these are pretty healthy foods, right? And we just eat them like crazy. In fact, blueberries are known to be a pretty natural anti-inflammatory, but here they are causing an inflammatory response in her specifically. So there's a lot of specificity to how everyone's body is a little bit different. But as it relates to somebody who's been eating bad things for a while, I would imagine there's no magic pill or pixie dust that someone can take to repair the gut. So as we start to talk about, okay, here's your issue, and how do we repair it? What are some of the techniques that you've been working on and studying? I heard you on another show talk about the use of fecal matter from other people and putting that inside to start to rebalance the gut for them. Can you talk a little bit about some of the reparative techniques that exist today?
Yeah, there are a lot of different approaches people are starting to really do, and the best example is it's called fecal microbiome transplant. It's basically fecal transplant. You take some stool sample from somebody who's healthy, and you transfer it into somebody who is, let's say, with C. diff, okay, and in fact, C. difficile, which is a bacteria that is in our gut and cause a lot of issues. And what they found that having the microbiome in a way, which is in the stool of the healthy people, when you put it in the person who is sick, it rebalances their gut, and lo and behold, they become good, okay? So now people are trying to see what approaches we can do to do the same. Instead of stool samples, people looking at the diet. What sort of diet I can follow so that I can balance it. Another approach is, can you use probiotics, for example, to try to again enrich the helpful or the beneficial microbes? Another approach people now we are starting to look at in research is what's called postbiotic, which means some of these organisms that are probiotic, they produce some molecules such as short chain fatty acids, which are good. So now instead of giving you the microbe, they're giving you the chemical. That's why they said postbiotic, okay? And all of this come together. It could be singly or a combination of them, depending on the person, obviously, that will work to rebalance your gut and make you feel well.
So there's obviously a number of different techniques that exist when it comes to repairing the gut. I think a lot of people right now, we hear the term probiotics thrown around a lot. The supplemental industry is a multi-billion dollar industry. And I think a lot of people who experience some digestive health issues, like you said, the bloating, the gas, the constipation, maybe some inflammation, and they start to take those probiotics, or maybe start to eat things that have been known to have more probiotics in, like yogurt, Greek yogurt, things like that. What's your opinion on the probiotic supplementation? Is it useful? Is it a waste of money? And is it really is a probiotic something that will have a universal effect on people? Or does there need to be an assessment of where the imbalance is so that we know what type of probiotic or what type of treatment to provide there?
I think this is really very, very interesting question, but it has a number of elements in it. So let me address one at a time. Number one, are probiotics good to use? First of all, to me, look at it. If we have some imbalance in our gut, we need to adjust it. The first thing I would do is I will depend on diet. I'll try to eat good diet As you mentioned in my book, Total Gut Balance, we describe a take following a good diet that gonna inhibit the growth of bad bugs while encouraging the good ones. Okay, so your first thing should be, let's look at what we eat and let's adjust it so that we have more fibers, which will feed the good guys. Okay, then sometimes you really need a helping hand. And that's why it's called nutritional supplement. You supplement your food. It should not be dependent on them. If I'm not feeling well, I shouldn't say, oh, let me have probiotic. It's like a pill for everything. No, we can have a combination. Let's start to improve our way of eating. At the same time, if we need the probiotic, I think you can use it. It will be beneficial. But I will not uh, think that, I'll take care of it with the probiotic alone. No, my advice is try to really have a combination of them. And if you need a supporting hand, taking probiotic will be very good. So now that's one part of the answer. The second part, you said, can we use any probiotic, or should we know what type of probiotic? You know what? We are lucky now. Before, like maybe 5 or 10 years ago, we did not have a good understanding of probiotics. Now we are starting to understand better and better. Why? Because now we know we are not all the same in our microbiome. So for me to know what type of probiotic I should take, I would love to do a test, which for the sake of transparency, the company which I co-founded, Biome Health, we do gut testing where we can profile your microbiome, what bacteria is there, what the fungus is there, and based on that, then you can customize what sort of probiotic you take to help you. So it's really getting, I feel good actually about it, because before it was like Wild West it comes to probiotic. Now we have more and more science behind it. And also the National Institute of Health now is putting more money for investigators or for companies to try to understand their probiotics so that they are better use of those probiotics rather than just do it haphazardly.
So let's talk about that test for a minute that you spoke about. I was reading up a little bit about that with your company that you're part of, and talk about the test, what's involved with the test, what results they should expect back, and then what the treatment pattern would be thereafter. And in fact, I'd be very interested in doing this myself. So selfishly speaking, I'd like to know the experience and what my expectations would be, but also for the listeners, because, I think this is becoming more and more of an issue as people are continuing to consume processed foods in a box, those types of things that are born out of convenience, right? But the reality is our bodies were built over hundreds of millions of years of evolution, and only in the last 20 years that we start eating things out of a box. So I think this is where a lot of these problems are coming from. I'm sure you're nodding your head, you agree. But yeah, could you talk about that test and sort of a little bit greater depth?
Sure. I mean, this test basically, you want to understand your profile of bacteria and fungus that live in your gut. So you look at it, what is there? Are there more good guys or bad guys? How to do it? You send a stool test, a stool sample. There's a kit where you order. You also have some questionnaires you answer, because it's very important to know not only about your gut, also about lifestyle. Do you exercise? Are you stressed out? Do you sleep well? All this sort of thing. Do you take a lot of antibiotics? So basically, you apply. You go into the site. You fill your questionnaire, then they'll send you a kit. And this kit, at home kit, you can, when you go to the bathroom, you can take a swab, collect a small size, pea-size stool sample, send it to the lab. And what they do is they analyze, they do sequencing. This is the modern way of understanding what organisms called next generation sequencing. And they look at what bacteria is there, what fungus. Remember what we said, there are communities of organisms. So it's not one type of bacteria. So they look at different bacteria there. members of the community or members of a household, for example. The same with respect to the fungus. And then you come out with a list of these organisms. Now, at the same time, we look at the questionnaire. So you do the sequencing, that goes into the platform, and then they generate a report based on your profile. It's like your finger print, thumbprint or whatever, of your microorganisms there. But they look at also your lifestyle. And then based on that, there is a team of nutritionists that can send you recommendations. So that if you see, like, for example, if there is a lot of organisms known to cause inflammation, then they tell you you need to take vitamin D, you need to take fiber, for example, because that will reduce the amount of those organisms. So you have recommendation, dietary recommendation, what type of food you should eat. You have some nutritional supplement recommendation, also lifestyle recommendation. For example, if you don't exercise, they advise you to have at least moderate exercise. I am a great believer in moderation. So just even go for a walk, half an hour, 4 times a week, or that will be helpful. Also, if you are stressed out, you really need to take care of that, because stress have been shown, because of the gut-brain axis, to affect your health. So it's very important to try to address stress. Unfortunately, these days within a COVID situation, we are all stressed out. With the kids not going at school, or it better than me. It's really stressful time. But it's important that you do something to try to reduce that. Talk to your family, talk to your friends, share your worries. Maybe that will help you. And also do some yoga, meditation. So all of this will be part of the recommendations that you will receive based on your gut analysis of the microbiome, as well as your meta data or daily data of, as I mentioned, diet, exercise, etc.
That's a great service, and something that as we get toward the end of the show, I want you to kind of tell us where people can get in contact with that organization to take advantage of that. I'll be, your next customer to give that a shot, because I believe in if we're going to make change in something, we need to understand where we are today, right? So by doing an assessment, and then I would assume that over time, people who follow that protocol that you serve up with the nutrition, exercise, stress relief, and supplementation, and then potentially even retest, so far down the road to see the impact that and the change in the microbiome with another test, which I know is a great way to see the effectiveness of it. So, what can someone, and maybe this is kind of a challenging question, but people who are experiencing different types of gut issues, right? Leaky gut, let's use that for example, because I think it's pretty common, and maybe it's overdiagnosed, but it's something that I think it seems like it's relatively common. And those who have inflammation, if they start to take some of these reparative types of measures, what can someone expect in terms of a time frame, assuming they stick with it, assuming that they make those adjustments and they commit to it? What's the timeline expectation? Considering it took most people a long time to get there, it's not like an overnight thing. I know there's certain things that, because I've heard other talks of yours where, the change with, I think it's fungus, can happen nearly overnight, right? Almost in 24 hours, but some of the other things can take quite some time.
Yes, I think this is really important to address, because people, as you say, what's the expectation? I mean, to me, we did a clinical trial with the total, two things I wanted to, two clinical trials. One where we put people on diet, the total gut balance diet, and that was a 4-week program, okay? And then we looked at their microbiome at 2 weeks and at 4 weeks. So we compared at baseline when they first started, 2 weeks after, and then 4 weeks after, okay? And what we noticed, by 2 weeks, you start to see a change in the microbiome. But some of the symptoms they have did not go away enough. Mm-hmm. But by 4 weeks, we started to see people improving. So to me, 4 to 6 weeks, if you stick to this program, it may help you start to see really better, less constipation, people have less cravings and also slept better at night. So I would say 4 to 6 weeks should be a good time to start to see a change. Now, we also did another study where we looked at the using the probiotic, biome probiotic, to see does it make a difference. But what we really were interested there, can we change the structure of the microbiome? Those playing in the sandbox, can we change them to become better, good kids instead of kids that fighting? And again, it was about 4 week period where people could start to see that there is a change in the microbiome. Now, to me, you are asking, so you take the test, they give you the recommendation, and I would say it will be a good idea after 3 to 6 months to look again, take the test, and see, did it really make a difference in there? And we have some people who did that within 3 months, and they start to see, they seem to be happy. But it depends on the individual person. But I would predict that at least 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks will be a minimum time for you to start to see some changes.
And then obviously the key after that is to stick with it, because I think, unfortunately, a lot of people have these, we'll call it like a fad diet approach, where they just try things for a certain time, they start to feel better, but we fall back into bad habits. And I think just the way society is, and with the way people travel, maybe not as much now, but when things resolve back to normal, it can be challenging without the knowledge and understanding of some of those types of foods that you need to eat in order to have that good gut balance. Now, obviously, there's the supplementation. So the people that don't get the test, the people that just are like, you know what, I have bloating, I have constipation, I don't feel well. Your book, I know, addresses a lot of that, and it talks about the types of foods that we can eat and the type of diet that we can have to really start to treat the kids in the sandbox the right way, right? Give them their juice boxes and fruit snacks analogously, of course, so that they're happy in the sandbox. Can you talk through specifically the types of foods, a typical day in a diet of somebody that is going to be, eating, in alignment with your book and your recommendations?
I think what's really important about the diet, to follow something which, number one, you can stick to. A lot of the time you have these fad diet, you cannot eat this, or you cannot do that, or you have to restrict so much, and you can do it for 4 weeks and this sort of thing, but after that you get tired. To me, it's very important to have a balanced diet, something that have really nutritional food, should have seafood, for example, a lot of good plant proteins, for example, are very good. You need some fibers. You need to have complex carbohydrates, like you see you find it in potatoes, for example. You find it in oatmeal. These are good. At the same time, you need to really make sure you have some. I know we talked about berries, like strawberries and this sort of thing. In certain cases, of course, like your wife, you have to be careful. But these are some good food that will support you. You need to have some food that have antioxidants. Vitamins is very important. You need to cut down in the purified sugar, like pure sugar, not good. And especially for fungi, candida loves the sugar. So the more sugar you have, the more problem you are going to have with your candida. So cut that down. With respect to dairy products, I think we should have dairy, but let it be non-fat or skim, low fat. Then it's good. Why I say this? Because I'm trying to get rid of the saturated fats, which is in whole milk. But at the same time, I like the vitamins, I like the proteins, casein, for example, or other these good stuff, minerals in the dairy product will help you. You know what I mean? So if you are careful like this, you should be fine. Another thing which I always like to talk about, alcohol. Alcohol, too much of it is not good. I'm not saying don't drink, but have a glass 2-3 times a week, that's fine. But if you take so much, it's not helpful, not only for your gut, also for other issues as well.
Yes.
So all in all, that's what you really, if you follow, you should be in a good shape.
So, what's all the fad today? When we talk about diets, a lot of people are talking about intermittent fasting, right? This whole concept of a 16-8, and that feeding window of 8 hours, as well as, doing these juice fasts or water only fasts. I did a celery juice fast. So I drank celery juice 3 times a day and just water for 3 days, and that's it. And I did actually see a remarkable reduction in inflammation. It was remarkable actually, for me personally. But what's your feeling on gut health? Does it help? Does it really not do anything? Does it reset it? How does this whole fasting sort of fad play into gut health?
Yeah. Remember, I come from Lebanon, and in Lebanon, there are people fasting and this sort of thing, so I have experience. My issue is, I think fasting is good. The problem is you want to combine it with good food. Because I remember, again, when I was a young boy, people fast all day from sunrise to sunset, and in the evening, they gorge themselves and they eat all this type of food. So to me, I think fasting or intermittent fasting is useful. It teaches your body to slow down and this sort of thing. It really make you appreciate also, apart from the actual benefit to your gut, you appreciate the fact that people, how they get hungry and this sort of thing. But at the same time, you need to be careful. When you break your fast, try to eat the good food, because again, we need to encourage the growth of beneficial organisms. So that's where I warn people. I like it, but always remember that we need to make sure we get also the right food. You cannot fast and then go and eat all high fat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was funny when I went through the fast myself. I was reading a lot about refeeding syndrome and making sure I don't eat something that's high in glycemic or high in sugar. Even things like berries and stuff like that. When I first came back, to eat more foods rich in fiber. A lot of spinach and broccoli and things like that. So I refed a little bit slowly, but I could see those fasting for like Ramadan. And I have friends who I know will sleep all day during that time and then
Yes.
stay up all night and just stuff their
Yeah.
faces in
I,
order to
that's
sort
so
of,
funny you should say that.
it
I
is.
honestly, I used to see it. Like basically, they change the day to night and night to day. I'm not saying everybody, but that's how what some people do, and that's why we say, look, okay, you fast, that's great, but please don't in the evening just gorge yourself, as I mentioned.
So when we talk about fasting, is it the fact that the kids in the sandbox, that community now is not the good bacteria are not being fed, but also the bad bacteria aren't being fed? Because I mean, these things are eating what you're eating basically, and then they're basically pooping in you, so to speak, and sending what do you call them, the metabolites
Metabolites, yes.
metabolites into your system. So when you starve them, right, so to speak, during a true fast, an extended water only fast, let's say, does that help allow the gut to repair? And is there benefit to like a true long-term fast for somebody that has a really bad gut issue?
I really think fasting is quite good because you give yourself a relaxation, as you said, from the amount of food and different. But honestly, the most important thing is to think about it and eat the right type of food when you're breaking it down. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, the benefit of fasting is not there. And also, don't eat too much, not just the type of food. Like people, all day, can you imagine if you fast, like, as you say, uh, 8:16, uh, you are hungry. So then when you want to break that fast, if you eat a lot of amount, because you are very hungry, you eat too much. No. So moderation is the way. Good food and moderate amount of.
So, from a gut response perspective, when I was younger and started, I'm talking 20 some odd years ago, when I started getting to weight training and physical fitness, At that time, the discussion was always around eating a lot of small meals throughout the day, right? So eating 7 to 10 small meals, like a cow grazing in a field. You're just constantly just eating instead of dumping this big lump of food on your stomach all at once. But now there seems to be somewhat of a shift where it's like, well, no, actually, intermittent fast, don't eat. And then when you have that feeding window, that's when you're jamming a lot of your food consumption to a small window. And maybe I know people that only eat twice a day. They eat 2 big meals and they feel great. So does it matter? Is there a difference in terms of how our body processes that, how our gut processes it, and how we should eat in your experience and in your research?
I mean, like to me, I think what you should do is in the morning, I have, I give you what I do, In the morning, I have some cereals, some with some berries. I love oatmeal, for example, And then by 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, I feel like I'm a little bit hungry. So what I do, I eat some nuts, pistachios. I eat some uh, almonds. I have a variety, mixed nuts, just I have a little bit at 9:30, 10 o'clock. And then at lunchtime, I'm tending these days to eat more vegetables like, I love tomatoes. I love fruits. So I eat not much protein. And then in the evening, I have a nice meal. I like proteins. We have, roasted vegetables. Uh, that should be very good. So again, it's really you can space it because sometimes, as you say, like by 9:30 to 10 o'clock, I feel hungry, so I eat a little bit. But eat the right stuff. Like for example, there are studies to show pistachio is the really great from the microbiome point of view. It seems it's even better than almonds, paper published. So take something different, but not all the time should be condensed. So make a variety, and this way would allow you, like in the morning you are having the oatmeals with their fiber. At lunchtime you have all the vegetables and the nice protein, plant-based protein, and in the evening you can have chicken, you can have, I love salmon, for example. So that's the type of thing I would do.
So obviously, you talked about a couple of foods that are out there that you eat, and the key is moderation, from
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say, and the key is balance. The key is eating the right things. Now, there's certain foods that are better for the gut than others. That those who are having issues maybe want to consume more of. You mentioned pistachios. Tell me a little bit about your studies that you've done on garlic for our Italians that are on the line, that like to cook with a little bit of garlic, because I thought that was pretty fascinating. Garlic is always been known, aside from warding off vampires, as being a pretty good thing to cook with. Can you talk a little bit about garlic? Because
Sure.
you've spoken quite a bit about it.
Oh, I tell you something. I published 3 articles on garlic. What happened is, I always tell the story. I used to be professor at university in Kuwait in the botany and microbiology, plants. So, and this guy, he used a faculty member. Every morning he comes to me. You should study garlic. People who take garlic don't have any fungal issues in their mouth, like candida, thrush. I said, leave me alone. I don't want to do this. But every day that guy bothered me. He was a friend, obviously. So what I did, I studied garlic and I published. It's a fantastic, really uh, ingredient. What we showed is that it can inhibit actually the fungus candida in the thrush. It also has very good biofilm activity. You know what biofilm, sometimes like the plaque in our teeth is a biofilm. Every morning we brush our teeth, to get rid of that. What we found is garlic is able to break the biofilm, which forms sometimes in our gut, where bad bacteria and fungus, they come together, they form what you call digestive plaque, and garlic has very good activity against them. So from my point of view, garlic is one of the best, as well as apple cider vinegar is great from that point of view. But garlic, it's close to my heart because, by the way, it helped me to come to America. They invited me after my publications to give a talk in the first World Congress on the Biology of Garlic in DC. And that's where I presented my work, and that's what I came to the US through. So garlic has a number of, I love it for a number of reasons. It's benefit to our health as well as to what it did to my life.
Tell if I've heard the story a few times on other shows about, and it's such a heartwarming story about how you came to America and how you ended up staying here. That whole story with the travel agent. I think it's worth bringing up and hearing the story because it just a random act of kindness that I think people need to hear and pass along. You mind sharing that story?
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, it started, as we say, with the garlic. I was I was in holiday with my family in England when the invasion of Kuwait happened, and I lost my job overnight. But I was invited to give a talk to DC at the Willard's Hotel, in fact, on the garlic. And I had my visa, I had everything. So I came and I said to my wife, you know, I'm gonna go and get a job also in America. And this English friend of mine, he said, you cannot do it. You go in 2 weeks, you cannot do it. I say, listen, I have to get a job. I need it. I have no job. So I came here and I went to the National Institute of Health where Dr. Jack Bennett helped me. He said, Mahmoud, you should come to a meeting next week because we have everybody who study fungus will be in DC. I said, I can't. But anyway, in my way to the hotel, I saw a travel agent. Honestly, he is a African American black guy. I went to him. I say, I need your help. He looked at me. He said, what do you want? I said, I need you to change my ticket. I need to go stay with my friend till I come next week because there is a big meeting. I need to come because I need a job. He looked at me and he did it, you know.
But you didn't have any money, right?
I did not have money. He changed my ticket. He gave me some money, $80. And oh my God, I tell you, I came the week after. And guess what? In that evening at Dr. Bennett's house, where he invited all the investigators, like the top scientists in the field of fungus, to his house, I went there and I got 2 jobs.
That's amazing.
I took the one at UCLA, and that's what brought me to America. And as he said, you know, in this day and age, it's so important because we all passing through tough time. The, Mr. Dorsey's help to me changed not only my life, also my kids' life, and we are all now here. So always pay it forward, my friend, because this is so critical, because we are all human beings, and this is what makes America a fantastic place.
Agreed. That's a great story. And I think you said you have is there a foundation or a scholarship in his name that you've created?
So we created a scholarship at Case Western Reserve University in his name. And some people now are putting money into that as well. So this is really great. We are hoping that they use this money to help a student who cannot afford, you know, some tuition or at least a little bit towards it.
That's fantastic. And you're right. I mean, especially in these times, you know, just the fact that you're giving us your time to be able to educate people on gut health is very generous of you, because I know you're extremely busy and this impacts so many people. It's impacting me, somebody that, I never for a second would consider I had an issue with what I was consuming because I associated eating bad with weight. Right. But I think a lot of people don't realize you can be very thin and still have quite a few issues with your gut. So I can't thank you enough for your time. A couple more last questions for you as we wrap this up. So first question is, you know, what's the number one takeaway for those who are listening? If they forget everything that you've said over the last 45 minutes, what's the number one thing that you'd want them to take away from this conversation into their lives to start to make a change to their gut and how they're living their day-to-day life?
The number one takeaway is that it is in your hand. If you want to have good gut health, try to take care of your gut by eating the right stuff, because you can do it. You can encourage the good microbes that live in your gut. And by doing that, you are going to have not only good gut health, but overall wellness.
Last question. How can we find you? How can we learn about the test? How can we get in contact with you and get your book? Because I think your book is filled with great information. I just ordered mine.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think if anybody wants to learn more, they should go to biomehealth.com, BIOHM health.com, where you have the test, you have our about our probiotics, and also a lot of information that will help people, to educate them about the diets and about how to take care of yourself. Also, the book, it's available on Amazon, where Total Gut Balance, where you can find it. And there is also in biomehealth.com, there is microbiome report where we have different speakers. They come and what they do, they really share with the audience their experience and how to make your gut health better and take care of yourself.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate you so much. And I know everyone in our audience appreciates you spending the time today to talk with us, Doctor. And thanks again for coming on the show. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure. I really enjoyed it tremendously. Bye-bye.
Right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Adapt You podcast today. Our goal with this show and all of our content is to deliver you the guests and the respective knowledge necessary to help you change something in your life. Everyone who listens to this show has something they want to affect and something they want to change. And our goal is to help give you the knowledge necessary to take you down that path on becoming the absolute best version of yourself. If you like what you heard today, please tune in to all of our shows and also check us out in social media. You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, and check out our website and have some great content on there as well. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next show.